What a blessing to be here with so many patriots. Pastor Steve, thank you so much for opening us up in prayer. Rich, thank you for your incredible ministry. Thank you for spreading the gospel. Thank you for your radio stations all across this great nation. And Mark and Amanda, thank you so much for your principled leadership. Thank you for leading our team here on the ground. Thank you for standing with courageous conservatives all across the state of Kansas. You know, you can learn a lot about a word by studying its history, studying its roots. If you look at the roots of the word politics, there are two parts. Poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. And that is a fairly accurate description of Washington, D.C. And yet, you know, all of us, we are here tonight for something a lot more important than politics. We're here because we love this country. And America's in crisis. We're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Our constitutional rights are under assault each and every day. And America has receded from leadership in the world, and it has made the world a much more dangerous place. And yet I want to share with each of you a word of hope and encouragement and exhortation. All across Kansas and all across this country, people are waking up. I believe this election in 2016 will be about three key issues: jobs, freedom, and security. Let's talk jobs for a minute. I want to talk to the single mom who's working 2 or 3 part-time jobs, 28, 29 hours a week, because Obamacare kicks in at 30 hours a week. I want to talk to the truck driver, or the plumber, or the mechanic, the man or woman with calluses on your hands, who's seen your wages stagnate year after year after year, not go anywhere. The cost of living keeps going up, but your wages somehow don't keep up with the cost of living. I want to talk to the young people coming out of school with student loans up to your eyeballs. Scared, what kind of future am I going to have? Am I going to get a job? Am I going to learn skills? Am I going to be able to provide for my family? The last 7 years, the Obama-Clinton economic stagnation has been a disaster, and yet I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be this way. You know, it's easy to say you want to make America great again. You can even print that on a baseball cap. That is where the caps are made, is China. But the critical question is, do you understand the principles and values that made America great in the first place? When it comes to jobs, the heart of our economy is small business. You want to kill the economy? Do what we've done the last 7 years. Hammer small businesses. On the other hand, you want to see the economy take off, then take the boot of the federal government off the backs of the necks of small businesses. If I'm elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We'll pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors. And we will pass a simple flat tax. Where every American can fill out our taxes on a postcard. And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. You know, a whole lot of us are frustrated with Washington, are angry with the corrupt deal makers that make promises and then they go to Washington and they don't do what they say. And I'll tell you, no issue captures that better than the issue of immigration. Now listen, immigration is a law enforcement issue. Immigration is a national security issue. But immigration is also at its heart an economic issue. And here's the unfortunate truth: neither party in Washington wants to fix this problem. We're doing it together. You know, the Democrats support illegal immigration because they view them as future voters. You know, there's a new politically correct term for an illegal immigrant. It's called undocumented Democrat. But the Republicans aren't much better. Far too many of them in Washington listen to Wall Street and the lobbyists who just view illegal immigration as cheap labor. What a great, wonderful thing from their perspective. And you know, it's one thing to talk about illegal immigration. In a Republican primary, the candidates always do that. But if you want to know where someone stands, the simple question is, in 2013, when we were fighting the epic battle over the Gang of Eight amnesty bill, where did you stand? Now, some Republicans in Washington decided to break their word to their constituents and stand with Barack Obama and push for amnesty. I made a very different decision to stand with millions of Americans across this country and lead the fight to defeat amnesty. Now, I'm told that on the campaign trail, Donald Trump talks about immigration a fair amount. Well, there's kind of an interesting question. In 2013, when the Gang of Eight fight was being fought, where was Donald? He was funding them. Donald Trump was funding the Gang of Eight. Out of the 8 members of the Gang of Eight, Donald Trump supported 5 of them, gave them over $50,000 collectively. I don't know if he gave it to them $1 at a time. Now listen, you don't get to spend 40 years funding open border Democrats and then suddenly wake up one day and say, hey, I'm for securing the border. And you know, last week at the debate, we learned that Donald Trump also faced a $1 million court judgment for hiring illegal immigrants. Now that might be what Al Gore calls an inconvenient truth. But you know, Donald's defense, to be fair, he says, hey, that was a long time ago. Okay, fine. How about last week? Last week, the news broke that Donald's fancy hotel down in Florida has brought in hundreds of foreign workers because they're not willing to hire Americans. Now, when that came out that night, Donald went on CNN and he explained himself. He gave his defense. He said, look, Americans just aren't qualified and aren't willing to work as waiters and waitresses. Now, let me ask that question. How many people here have worked as a waiter or waitress? But this is America. My dad started washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And roughly 300 Americans applied for those jobs. You know how many Donald hired? 17. Instead, he brought in hundreds of foreign workers because he could pay them less, because they were captive, because they couldn't quit, they couldn't go anywhere else. Now listen, in doing that, Donald is not different from a whole bunch of other giant corporations that do the same thing. But you don't get to abuse American immigration laws, abuse American workers, and then suddenly wake up one day and say you're a champion for American workers. And this week it got even worse. This week news broke that Donald, earlier this year, This week it got even worse. Because it was reported that earlier this year, Donald had gone to New York to sit down with the New York Times. And they have a secret tape recording of Donald saying, all this stuff I'm saying on immigration, I don't mean it. That wall I'm talking about, I ain't going to build it. Deporting illegals, I'm not going to do it. Now, the New York Times says that this was an off-the-record meeting, so they won't release the tape unless Donald gives his permission. Well, let me call on it right now. Donald, release the tape. Now, maybe the reports are wrong. I'm happy to give Donald the benefit of the doubt. We all know the press can't be trusted. If the reports are wrong, then Donald should be excited to release the tape because it'll prove his innocence. But Donald hasn't done that. He's not willing to release the tape. And what that suggests to anyone is, what is Donald hiding? And if he's going to Manhattan and telling the New York Times that he is lying to the voters, then the voters have a right to know, and we have a right to know before we vote. Here's what we're going to do. If I'm elected president, we are going to build a wall. And I've got somebody in mind to build it. We are going to triple the Border Patrol. We are going to end sanctuary cities by cutting off taxpayer dollars. And we are going to end welfare benefits for people here illegally. And when we do that, we are going to see millions more jobs for American citizens. We're going to see wages coming up. And then, when we repeal Obamacare, when we pass a flat tax, when we abolish the IRS, we're going to see small businesses exploding. We're going to see millions upon millions of high-paying jobs, of wages through the roof, of young people coming out of school, getting 2, 3, 4, 5 job offers. The second critical issue of this election is freedom. Justice Scalia's passing a couple of weeks ago underscored for millions the stakes of this election. Just over a week ago, I attended Justice Scalia's funeral. I had the privilege of knowing him personally for over 20 years, having served as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court, having litigated in front of the Supreme Court for over a decade. Justice Scalia was a lion of the law. He was a ferocious defender of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And his passing underscores the stakes of this election. We are one justice away from a radical 5-justice left-wing majority, the likes of which this country has never seen. This election is not about one branch of government, it's about 2 branches of government. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court stripping away our religious liberty and empowering the government to force each of us to violate our faith upon pain of prison or fine. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court ordering 10 Commandments monuments torn down all over this country. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court effectively erasing the Second Amendment from the Bill of Rights. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court tearing down veterans' memorials with religious symbols all over this nation. And we are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court making us subject to the authority of the World Court and the United Nations and international law and stripping away U.S. sovereignty. That's what's at the heart of this election. And you know, at the last debate, there was a moment of clarity. Donald Trump, when he was asked about religious liberty in the Supreme Court, he said, "Ted, I've known a lot more politicians than you have." You know what? In that, he's right. He's been supporting liberal Democratic politicians for 40 years. He said, "Ted, when it comes to the Supreme Court and religious liberty, you got to be prepared to make a deal. You got to be prepared to compromise." Well, let me be very, very clear to the men and women of Kansas. I will not compromise away our religious liberty. And I will not compromise away our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Look, there are places where compromise is appropriate. If you're negotiating over marginal tax rates, you can reach a middle ground. But when it comes to core principles, when it comes to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the last thing we need is a Washington deal maker willing to sell us down the river. And Donald Trump has told us that he intends to cut a deal with Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer on Antonin Scalia's replacement. Well, any justice that Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer sign off on is going to be a left-wing judicial nutcase. And I give you my solemn word that every justice I put on the Supreme Court will be a principled constitutionalist, faithful to the law, who will vigorously protect the Bill of Rights for your children. The third issue at the heart of this election is security. For 7 years, we've abandoned and alienated our friends and allies, and we've shown weakness and appeasement to our enemies. Once again, the debate last week provided a moment of clarity. Donald Trump said, just like Hillary Clinton, he would be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. Well, let me be very clear. As president, I have no intention of being neutral. America will stand unapologetically with the nation of Israel. You know, one of the most dangerous developments of the last 7 years has been the weakening, the undermining of our military. Our readiness has been degraded. Morale in the military has plummeted. And you know, we've faced these challenges before. We've seen a similarly left-wing, weak Democratic president in Jimmy Carter. And when Ronald Reagan came into the White House in 1981, what did he do? He passed tax reform and regulatory reform. He lifted the burdens of Washington on small businesses. Small businesses exploded. It created millions of high-paying jobs. That generated trillions of revenue for the government. Reagan used that revenue to rebuild the military, and we bankrupted the Soviet Union and won the Cold War. I intend to do the exact same thing with radical Islamic terrorism. We are going to rebuild this military so it remains the mightiest fighting force on the face of the planet. No longer will the U.S. military be governed by political correctness. No longer will their top priority be providing gluten-free MREs. Instead, we will have a commander-in-chief who stands up and says to the world, we will defeat radical Islamic terrorism. We'll have a president willing to utter the words, radical Islam, terror. And you know, one of the most disgraceful aspects of the last 7 years has been having a president who sends our fighting men and women into combat with rules of engagement that tie their arms behind their back and make it impossible for them to win and for them to defend us. It is wrong, it is immoral, and in January 2017, it will end. You know, America has always been reluctant to use military force. We are slow to anger. But if and when military force is needed, we should use overwhelming force, kill the enemy, and then get the heck out! Saturday. Caucus. The Kansas caucus. It was a primary, y'all changed it to a caucus. The Kansas caucus is on Saturday. Saturday, Kansas has a voice for the country. Yeah. And we have a fundamental choice. You know, if you look at the course of these primaries over the last year, we started with 17 candidates. And the entire process has been a winnowing of the fields. We saw it narrow to just a handful of candidates, and then I think last night on Super Tuesday, it narrowed even more. You know, let me speak to the 65 to 70% of Republicans in Kansas and across the country who recognize that Donald Trump is not the best candidate to go head-to-head with Hillary Clinton. If Donald is the nominee, in all likelihood, Hillary becomes the next president of the United States. What Super Tuesday illustrated is there is only one campaign that has beaten Donald Trump over and over again, and that can and will beat Donald Trump. So I'd like to take a moment to speak to folks in Kansas who may be supporting other candidates. There are a lot of good people who started out in this race. A lot of good people remain in this race. People who are honorable, people who are decent, people who love this country. But at this point, if you don't want to see Donald Trump as the nominee, there's only one campaign in a position to beat him.
That's right.
If you've been supporting another candidate, we welcome you on our team.
Yes, we do.
If you've been supporting Ben Carson, or John Kasich, or Marco Rubio, all good, honorable men, we welcome you on our team.
Not a good man.
If you've been supporting Donald Trump, we really welcome you on our team. And if you're frustrated with the Washington corruption, then don't vote for a Washington deal maker who's been part of the corruption for 40 years. Saturday, at the Kansas caucus, I want to ask every one of you to vote for me 10 times. Now look, we're not Democrats. I'm not suggesting voter fraud. But if every one of you goes and gets 9 other people to come out Saturday and vote, you will have voted 10 times. And you know, if you're not yet old enough to vote, if you go and get 10 other people to come out and vote on Saturday, you will have voted 10 times before you turn 18. Now, I want you to look around. We've got over 2,000 people here and in the overflow room. If everyone here gets 9 other people collectively, the men and women gathered right here, that is 20,000 votes. That is enough to decide the Kansas caucuses. In 3 days, the men and women gathered here can change and control the outcome of the election on Saturday, can have a voice for Kansas nationally, that we want a proven, principled, constitutional conservative. We can do this. You know, it took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan. And I am convinced the most long-lasting legacy of Barack Obama is going to be a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party who stand and fight for freedom, who stand and fight for the Constitution, and who stand and fight for the Judeo